Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Simon Brace.
So obviously we're doing different episodes as we are in South Africa. Well, at least I am. The other team is still in the States. But we have an awesome opportunity to showcase different ministries we're working with. And as mentioned, we have Simon Brace with Ratio Christi here. And I've known Simon for over 20 years, I believe. So Simon and I went to school together back at Southern Evangelical Seminary back in the States. And so I was looking forward to saying we're live in studio, but I'm live recorded in Potchefstroom. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Potchefstroom.
Yeah.
So it is exciting for me to be able to share with our audience just the ministries we partner with, why we're here in South Africa, and what we're doing. So, Simon, tell us a little bit about Ratio Christi, what it is, why you're involved. Just for those who've never heard of Ratio Christi before, fill us in on what this is.
Okay, so the ministry began as a part of our missions outreach at our seminary where Thomas and I were studying in North Carolina. We were doing a variety of different outreach opportunities, and of course, as you engage the local culture, you realize that there are certain institutions that are key institutions within any given society, and chief amongst them would be the influence of the universities. In fact, in terms of ideas, I think they might be the most important, next to perhaps the family, I would argue, and the local churches or the religious institutions. There's good reason for that because that's where the ideas come from. So typically, everything else in culture is downstream from the university. So whatever you get in your universities is what you will get in the culture. And so we just thought, well, we've got to reach out on these institutions. Unfortunately, the history of the universities is that many of them, albeit that many of them were started by Christians, they've become very secular and often very hostile towards the Christian faith. And so we wanted to help our students on campus who are wrestling with a lot of questions and objections that come from their time at university. Many students are struggling with their faith. Unfortunately, many of them have their faith shipwrecked at university. And they just weren't ready for that kind of discussions going on our modern day campus. Yeah.
So that leads back to I served in youth ministry for 15 years, and we would always talk about I don't know what the numbers are in South Africa, but in the States, about 80% of our kids would leave the faith after they go off to college. Like it only took about a year or two, and they would be hit with these ideas. Their faith would be. Sometimes it's not even necessarily frontline challenged. It might just be subverted as people start, just simply asking the questions that they can't answer. And I try to train our teenagers, questions are not arguments. Just because somebody asks a question doesn't mean that there's not an answer. And questions don't assert, but it's a little subversive. And I would watch my teenagers that I had in the youth ministry, sometimes for 6 years. I would disciple these kids, and they would go off to college, and it's almost like we've thrown them to the wolves, and that they didn't know what to do. And I would watch them. They would come back, and you could see semester after semester the influence. And so this is why Ratio Christi is something I fully support, and we have many chapters in the States. It started in the States. I have several friends with Ratio Christi. So there's an element if somebody's going off to college, there's an element where I can tell them, hey, there's a Ratio Christi chapter. You can go connect with them. And sometimes I know who they are. I can send the information. And it really is as these kids, 18 years old, are leaving home, they're leaving their youth ministries, they're leaving their churches, they're leaving, in many ways, what they've known and going into who knows what. That's why we work with Ratio Christi here in South Africa. And so if a parent was looking like, okay, so you're in South Africa, where's Ratio Christi established so far in which universities in South Africa?
Yeah, so again, like I said, the organization, it did began in North Carolina, actually at Appalachian State University. That's
Hmm.
where the first event was. So we just saw a need to get amongst the students and do campus work on these institutions and help the young Christians to stand and give them a voice. Here in South Africa, we have established ourselves at University of Pretoria, Academia, which is a new private university started by the Afrikaans community, here at Northwest University in Potchefstroom. And then we've got a chapter at Stellenbosch University, at UCT, at Rhodes University, and University also of Johannesburg. That's a new chapter. That's a fairly recent development. And also at UKZN and down in KwaZulu-Natal on the East Coast at the Maritzburg campus. So there's still a lot of campuses which we hope to have a presence on and to form a chapter, which is basically a group of Christian students who meet on a weekly basis, if possible, to basically deal with the kinds of questions and objections that come up often in these institutions, and to wrestle with them, to teach the Christians that there are answers, that just because you don't have an answer doesn't mean there isn't one, and to introduce them to the discipline of apologetics and worldview, philosophy, and how to grapple with the ethical questions, questions related to faith and science or faith and reason. These are issues with which young people are dealing, strengthening their faith. And then we're also an evangelistic organization, because we're not just there to try and serve the Christian students in terms of strengthening their faith, but we're hoping to get them to understand the belief systems of those around them, those who don't hold to the Christian worldview, and so that we can be more effective in sharing the gospel in our witness towards people who are not Christians. So this is also part, and so it's kind of apologetics foundation with an evangelistic goal. So it's an evangelism that is informed by a strong proclamation of the gospel, and also a defense of the gospel, which is what the word in the New Testament is. The word apologetics comes from the word apologia, which is to give a defense for your faith. As it says in 1 Peter 3:15, we should always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us. And the word in Greek in the New Testament for reason there is apologia, which is where we get the word apologetics from. It's not saying, oh, I'm sorry for being a Christian. It's giving people reasons for why you think Christianity is true. Yeah, and we see this even in Paul's ministry in some sense. If you read Philippians, he said he was put out for the defense of the gospel, the proclamation and the defense of the gospel. And he sees that we are a part of that ministry. If you go and look at the book of Philippians, for example, we see Apollos also doing this. And I think most significantly, we see also Jesus engaging in very thoughtful dialogue with the people of his time, answering their questions and objections.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when I was involved with Ratio Christi in the Philippines, I went out there and they did a specifically evangelistic event, and it was about 150 skeptical teenagers who showed up at this event. And I did a little presentation, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And I think I spent the next hour and a half just answering questions. They were just firing them off one after another. And so this is how, in terms of kids going off to college, and as they don't find themselves alone, they can actually have, a group of like-minded believers that can strengthen them. But additionally, as they're engaging in their classes and they meet friends and people and they start having these questions, and they're coming from radically different backgrounds than what the students themselves have experienced or even know how to handle, that something like Ratio Christi is a great way to reach those and help reach from that evangelistic arm, but also just from that discipleship side, and being able to equip these students also with those answers and strengthen them in their faith. So you're in these different campuses. So what kind of, other than going to college and going to a Ratio Christi meeting, are there other activities, other conferences, other things that, somebody who's not actually involved in the colleges could connect with that you guys do?
Well, we have a lot of initiatives to connect with the local community. This might include things like conferences that are dealing with understanding the times. We're dealing with a lot of cultural apologetics issues related to understanding human sex and sexuality. We are also looking at dealing with the breakdown of the family, which has become a serious issue with which to contend. And then also we deal with we do apologetics conferences, because a lot of folks out there are doing are engaging, if they are engaging, are dealing with a variety of apologetic issues. It might be friends who've become atheists or agnostics. It's the influence of New Age thinking on the culture. Here in South Africa, we're dealing with African traditional religion and all of that as a worldview that influences that syncretism that comes with that. These are all apologetics issues. So we help do events that strengthen family and understanding the times in which we're living, specific apologetics conferences that deal with these kinds of things, responding to cults, or understanding what a cult is and responding to the cults. Then we also do worldview weekends, which is similarly focused as part of that work. Sorry.
No worries.
For example, we've had recently this year, we've had a conference up in Pretoria and also a conference down in Cape Town at UCT, where we invite our team in to do topics that are either contemporary issues with which South Africans are contending. There might be issues that are also kind of universal and that other Christians are dealing with elsewhere.
So one of those examples is, because it was 2 years ago, I think, you looped me into one of those conferences down in Cape Town.
That's correct, yeah.
And so I got to speak on like how we got our Bible, like where the Bible came from, why it's reliable. Mm-hmm. So those would be the general topics, but also, and what I love is by having Ratio Christi in local areas, the kinds of things that are immediately relevant to the society here, which again, in the States, sometimes our issues are different. Our particular issues are different. Mm-hmm. And even when I was in Nepal, which there's no Ratio Christi in Nepal currently, like you guys are going to fix that. But when I went to Nepal, they would tell me that the people in America don't answer the questions they have. So I think that's why it's so important to have boots on the ground, as we say.
Yeah.
Like with Ratio Christi here, though it started in the States, though it started in North Carolina, it is continuing to flourish because for many people I encounter and many parents sometimes are like, I didn't even know to ask that question. And I think that's why these conferences, worldview weekends that you guys do, this is the kind of thing that parents who are like, I'd like to know more, I'd like to understand, especially if you have, just last week we had Suzette Ellis, whom you know, she's with Apologetics SA. Part of how she got into it is her kid just started firing questions at her and she couldn't answer. And I know this is not an isolated incident among parents. So this is why with what you guys do is immensely helpful, tremendously so, to come alongside parents and help them. So what are some of the things that you in Ratio Christi, you're doing the conferences? Other than that, what are some of the ways you might partner with churches, or if a church says, especially if they're not anywhere near, what are some of the ways you have? What are some of the things that Ratio Christi does to support the local church and supporting families in that way?
Well, any Christian parent who is raising children in these times is even if they're not even sure what apologetics is well aware of the kinds of things going on in the culture that you don't want to have either in the lives of your children, your family, and most certainly your churches. And so we want to try and help parents to understand the times in which we're living. And the best way to help them do that is to do effective work in worldview courses and apologetics issues. That's what they're contending with. They're dealing with issues in the culture. And sometimes these issues, like we said, and you've mentioned, are beyond just the shores of South Africa. For example, moral relativism, everybody's got their own truth out there, is a false idea that plagues the globe. You have that same kind of nonsense in New Zealand and Australia, in South America and in Europe and in many other places, okay? But here in South Africa, we would have certain things which are contextual, like African traditional religion, and the fact that a lot of young people, students, either don't understand. If you might come from a European heritage, you might not understand those things. But if you're coming from a traditional African religion background, you're always wrestling with those issues. Yeah, you're always wrestling with those issues.
Excellent. So if some, now you guys, you'll go to churches. Like if a church says, "Hey, can you help us?" Like that's where they can talk with you. They can talk with the Ratio Christi team.
Yeah.
And what does that look like if a church that's not connected with the colleges, not connected with that, if they reached out, what are some of the things that you're able to do, or how do you minister and help the churches directly, like on their campus?
So what we do is obviously we try to focus, because of the universities, on churches close to campus, but we're open to all churches. So, for example, I'm going to be doing a conference, hopefully in KZN, in a small town in KZN called Matatiele, which is nowhere near any major university. So we're open to helping churches all over the country. And how we do that practically is we do training and equipping them. That might typically look like a worldview weekend, for example, or a conference starting on a Friday evening, because people work through the week, and we do, say, a Friday evening and a Saturday conference for them. We might do an arranged series of talks with churches, where we can pull in, through our relationships with our other partner organizations with whom we work. We know where to find really competent speakers to pull together really, really informed programs with great content. In addition to that, we have a website, ratiochristi.co.za, on which we have a lot of free ebooks, which attend to a lot of these questions that you can go and download for free. We have a lot of articles on there that are useful, and we've also got a website with a number of interviews with scholars from all around the world on all kinds of topics that range quite significantly. So these resources are available to everybody. So maybe parents can commend this to their kids. Maybe a parent wants to, first of all, understand the issue themselves. That's what we typically advise parents to do. If your children come to you with a question, the best way forward is for you as a parent to, first of all, wrestle and grapple with it yourself, and then bring that material to your child, and then you've got some basis for discussing these things. And that's what I would advise parents typically to do. But also, you wouldn't be wrong if you just said to a young Christian, "Here's a website, check out these Christians responding to these kinds of questions that you might have." So that's what we've got available to help the local church.
I think to encourage parents who get asked these kinds of questions, one thing I've learned, and I tell people that I say, is if someone comes and asks me a question and I really don't know the answer to it, I tell them, I cannot give you an answer that will satisfy you right now. Give me some time, or let's look at it together. And that's what I really wish among parents we saw more of. And so it's not about necessarily, and I know parents, they might feel overwhelmed. How am I supposed to learn all the answers to all the questions? You don't have to, but you can walk beside your child while you're able to do that. And when they go off and you've taught them, here's, as you learned together, you've given them those kinds of skills, you point them in the right direction. And there becomes an element where, for some parents, if you've established that relationship and you've got a kid out in university, to say, "Hey, I just heard about this organization, Ratio Christi. It's here in South Africa, and they've got these resources. What do you think about it?" And what I like too, in talking with the leadership, I know that Ratio Christi doesn't recommend any resources that you guys have not read. Okay, so it's
Yes.
unlike some places, they're like, oh, here's some random stuff. So it's very well vetted, it's very well presented, and what I also love is that the way that Ratio Christi operates, all the leadership, they're basically missionaries. They raise their own funds.
Mm.
So this is not big business. This is ministry to help the church,
Yeah.
which is why we partner and continue to partner with Ratio Christi. And we're actually doing one of these Worldview weekends, September 13th in Pretoria. It was originally designated a worldview weekend, so we're approaching it from the worldview of virtue, and I'm actually teaching more of like what this virtue is that we talk about, since we're families of virtue, and here with our whole idea of virtuous roots is really bringing forward these ideas and everything we're talking about with Ratio Christi, which the name is Latin. Okay, so what is the name? What is the name in English?
The name is means the reason of Christ. That's
And
what it stands for.
and that right there, it connects in with the whole idea of intellectual virtue, knowing the truth
Hmm.
and knowing how to live that out. And that's why we just commend this to parents. We just say, look, I've been coming now, I think first time 2019. I know at least I came for a couple days here, hung out with you guys.
Yes.
So, but every chance I get, I come. I try to come every year, partner with you guys. So to all of our listeners, get online, look at the events. Again, you can contact Families of Virtue, and if you're like, hey, who is that Simon guy? We always joke, like, listen to what Simon says. We used to play a game about that. Simon says. So if you want to know more about Simon Brace and Ratio Christi, what he's doing, we will be more than happy to make these connections. So Simon, thank you for this time. I appreciate it, brother, and we will catch all of you next time.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Thomas.